everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to share with you a really exciting project that I had so much fun working on this last month or so, and that is a lacy cottagecore Edwardian-inspired blouse. Keep watching to see how I made this and all of the crazy things that went wrong in this process. So let's get to it. So my initial inspiration for this is I wear a lot of like sleeveless dresses or vests or things like that, but recently I have not had a shirt that works well underneath it. I have like a couple of button-up shirts, but none of them are exactly what I want. When I was little, I had like a colonial pirate type shirt, you know, with the really poofy dropped shoulder sleeves and stuff that I wore all the time. And in fact, I wore it out. I wore it so much. But I have not had that in the last few years, and I really wanted something new to help take that place in my wardrobe. And since a lovely family member donated to me a huge collection of lace and fabric, I would go through this lace all the time and I'd look at it and be like, oh, what could I make with this? And so I was like, hey, let's make a lacy blouse for me, because I don't really have anything like that. This video, I kind of wanted to share my process and how long one of these projects actually takes. So we're going to have a little tiny day counter up in the corner over here, so you can see how many days this project took me. So the first thing that I did when I decided I wanted a nice white lacy blouse was I looked through all of the lace that I had. And I have kind of separated them into a few different categories, and for this project specifically I wanted to go for the scallop lace or white on white embroidery lace. So I'm going to be referring to all of this material as fabric, lace, or scallops interchangeably throughout this whole video, because for the purposes of this project they're all kind of the same thing. I looked through my stash and I had a bunch of large pieces for this, which I was very excited about. A lot of this lace you'll usually see will be like, you know, an inch, 2 inches, 5 inches, maybe a tiny bit more than that. But this was like several feet wide, which made me think, okay, some of this would look really good as like the main bulk of the shirt. And my original thought was to use like some of my husband's dress shirts as supplemental material, but honestly I didn't need any of that because I had so much length to, well, width I suppose. I had so much width to these fabric pieces that I didn't have to supplement it at all. So I found one fabric that looked really promising for the main body because it had like these 3 main pieces to it and then like a whole bunch of really pretty like waves down below. It had like a floral lace and then a grid type lace and then another floral that looked the same as up here, and then just a bunch of really nice fabric. So I was like, okay, immediately this is saying large ruffly collar. So I grabbed my dress form and I played around with a bunch of things, and then I decided, yes, this is exactly what I want for the main body of the bodice, and what should we do for the sleeves? And I managed to find this beautiful fabric with all of these like really pointy details and really nice like inch-wide motifs.
Because I could also like pleat this to match like that. That would be so cute.
I wanted to have the cuffs be a little bit tighter and the rest of the sleeve to kind of poof out from there, and I had exactly enough for 2 sleeves. No wiggle room at all. So I played around with like the shape of the like top of the sleeve, and I realized that I was going to need to bulk up these sleeves a bit because I was not going to have any poof at the top with just the fabric I had.
So that's basically what our new sleeve will look like.
A lot of my pieces had been a little bit yellowed just from disuse, so I wanted to make sure they were as clean as possible to move forward and the right shade so that all of them would match. My original idea was to have elastic at the neckline and at the sleeves, just to kind of like modernize it a bit and do something really unique with that. Alright, so we just got in some elastic, and I got 2 different sizes because I wasn't really sure which one would work best. I always love opening up packages. So I got a 1 inch and I got a 2 inch. 1 inch for the wrist. You can kind of see how there's like this little center motif, and that'll fit in perfectly there. So I think that's for that one. And I was thinking that the wider would be for the neckline. So it would be like that. And my plan was to sew these gathers or pleats on as neatly as I could, so that as you pulled the elastic, it would actually like unfold the pleats or the gathers, so that I could still have these really cute details, but it would just be stretchy, so I could just, you know, put my hands in and it would be easy peasy. So the fabric that I had for the bulk of the sleeve was just not going to be enough for creating the sufficient poof that I wanted. So I needed to figure out what I was going to do. Now, a common method of creating extra volume in a part of a garment is to add what's called a gore. And so for this particular project, I wanted to have something that would be quite wide so that I could gather it all together and would extend to about the elbow. So I wanted it to be generally triangular-ish. What does the inside look like? Or am I just doing this completely wrong and I should just do a gore of some other fabric? This is so complicated. Partially because I don't have all the fabric I would have in my dream scenario, you know? So, I mean, if I were to simplify this at all, I would use, like, this fabric. Okay, so I have a plan. We're gonna have an 8-inch circle. We're gonna leave 8 inches across the top of it, and then we're going to attach 24 inches of 3-inch trim around the rest of it. And then we're basically going to fold that in half. That's going to become our puff. And then I spent literally hours ironing all of my lace.
So we are making pretty good progress here. This is what it's looking like so far. This is our neckline, which is looking super, super cute. So I have put in gathers around the neckline just by stringing this green thread through the holes, which I'm probably going to remove later once I attach the elastic. Right now this is just to let the fabric sit in this position for a bit and to play with it. It's going to have a really cute ruffle at the top. I've counted a certain number of holes in this part of the pattern over, so we have the sleeves at the same spot on both sides. And I do need to make this a little bigger. Obviously this isn't as wide as the sleeve is going to end up being, but I mean, this is looking pretty good so far. I'm really happy with it.
And then that same day I also created some pleats for the sleeve cuffs, and I tried to figure out how I could gently tack down certain spots on the pleats so that when you pull the elastic it would unfold, and then when you released it, it would fall back into place. The next day I did the really nerve-wracking process of attaching one of the sleeve cuffs to elastic just to play around with that and see what it looked like. And the next day, I had a really bad migraine. In case you don't know, I do suffer from migraines and POTS, which can frequently slow me down a bit. And so I watched a bit of Bernadette Banner for inspiration. If you have not seen anything by Bernadette Banner, make sure you check her out. I'm going to link her channel down below because it serves so much inspiration. I watched the combinations video. I'll make sure to link that specific one down below because that was one of the ones she had that had a ton of insertion lace. So I really studied that to see what she did to connect lace to other lace or to connect lace to fabric. Once my head started to feel better, then I added the first U-turn of lace for the gore.
So the goal is to end up with this lace going in basically a U-turn this way and then back that way. And then one of these cute little circles is going to be attached to this section of the lace right here.
So the next thing I had to do was to slice up the center of that gore to actually open up the fabric. Because previously I had all of the sleeve fabric touching like this, and then I just added the lace on, and then I had to go through and slice it open to create that opening for the gore. So basically we've got, this trim part connected to the sleeve. And I've already gone along and tacked it down nicely following the shape of the lace. And I need to slice this up the center. So we've got this line here between these two pieces of lace that we need to slice. Hi, what you doing?
I'm checking you with you guys.
Ah.
So I think maybe I'm gonna squish it down and go save it. So I balance this so I'm a little worried for my balance. My thing broke and it's really current because I gotta fix so many things at the very end, and I gotta service this out. Can you see? Little kitten, because that's when it broke. So it broke into a part. So I gotta fix so many things.
I went back to my sleeve cuff pleats and I realized that they were just not going to work the way I wanted them to, because even though they looked really pretty all laid out and pinned into place, as soon as you wrapped it around an arm, all of those little pleats that had been nicely setting on everything else suddenly started poking up like a water wheel, and I did not want that. That does not look very elegant or Edwardian, and it's kind of a cool effect, but definitely not what I was going for right now. So I was like, okay, we need to figure out a new way to do this. How can we make those pleat flaps be a little bit smaller? And I played around with it a bit more. I tried a few different things, and eventually I settled on some box pleats. Now I believe they're called box pleats. I'm pretty sure they're called box pleats. Basically, instead of just being, how can I do this with my hands? Instead of just being straight across like this, and then you fold it kind of like that, instead you have a motif in the middle, and you do something along these lines. I don't know if that helps at all, but basically it allows you to have smaller pleats on each side so that each motif kind of stands on its own, and it's not large flaps, it's smaller flaps on each side of each motif. So I pinned those into place. I took my beautifully box pleated cuffs to the other room to iron them down. Burned it. I didn't burn it, I melted it. So I realized pretty quickly that the iron had actually somehow melted the fabric, which is weird because I had ironed all of this lace fabric before and I hadn't changed its settings on the iron. I hadn't ironed anything else in the meantime. But somehow they just got super, super crunchy. And this lace fabric was going to be completely unusable in the melted areas just because not only would it not drape, but also it was kind of shrunk, like a shrinky dink in on itself, so it was pulling in very weird ways. So there was no way it was going to be usable as is. So I did a little bit of Googling. I saw that one possibility would be to just soak it in fabric softener and water. And so I set it to soak without much hope, and I went downstairs to get a cup of tea, questioning my life choices. So then after a couple of hours of waiting around, I went back and checked my fabric and there was zero improvement. So I set it aside and went to bed. And the next day I tried to deal with the repercussions of this huge mistake on my part. Alright, so it is the next day and I've got my lipstick on, which means one thing. I mean business. We're going to figure this out. We're going to make a plan. I kind of have a bit of a plan of how we're going to attack these cuffs. And I'll try to talk it through with you right now. So,
I need to paint. I gotta show. Guys, so I need to paint my nails.
So obviously last night I messed up the cuffs on one of these sleeves, which is a humongous shame because they were turning out so cute. Yeah. So the cuffs on this one are pretty much shot, but we still have all of this. And we have enough material in here to do both cuffs if the cuff isn't pleated at all. And I realized that if I didn't use the elastic, then this blouse would be basically entirely free. Now, it would not be free for anyone that didn't have these laces in their stash, but for me, it kind of felt cool to be able to say, I have not spent a penny on this, it's just been sitting around. So it was kind of a free project for me, which I thought was really cool. So I decided, okay, we're not going to use elastic, let's find some buttons.
So here is my mom's box of buttons.
Then came the really scary process of cutting out the motifs from both sleeves. So even though the motifs on one of the sleeves were fine, I was going to have to harvest some of those pieces to use on the other sleeve. So I had to cut them off of both sleeves so that I could figure something out and then reattach them to both sleeves, which was absolutely terrifying. And I spent a very long time trying to figure out how I could keep a very similar look for the cuffs with half the fabric. And I played around with some ideas, and I wasn't quite happy with any of them yet. So the next working day, I spent some time looking through some other laces that I had, and nothing really went. I kind of just decided I'm just going to go with what I've got. But I was very frustrated because, you know, with every project, you're trying so hard to figure out how to make it work with what you've got, and there's always some kind of a curveball. But usually those issues aren't quite as bad as completely destroying one of the main parts of your design. Eventually, I got an idea for adding in a bit of a lining fabric to give the cuffs a little bit extra strength, since they were going to need to be able to withstand buttons and buttonholes. The next day, I switched over to a non-destroyed section of my project because I just needed to give myself like just a few days of not having to worry about fixing my mistake. Just let that thought process percolate over here while I'm working on, you know, a part of the project that actually went according to plan. This is the sleeve I've already done, which I didn't really film much of just because I wasn't sure this was... I wasn't sure this was exactly what I was going to end up doing, but I think I'm happy with it, so I'm going to move forward. So I'm getting ready to get back to work, and I'm trying to figure out what I am going to do with these cuffs, because I've done several iterations of this and I'm not happy with any of them. I tried to just like keep the points and try to overlay it over that, but I don't like how that's looking. So what I'm planning to do is just have a straight seam between the cuff and the sleeve, and just have the points on the far side of the cuff, so like closest to the hand,
which is going to lose, you know, half the motif, but I think it's going to be the easiest to do. Alright, so did some basting along the bottom here, and then did some pad stitching up here on all of the pleats to hopefully keep them in place. Now let's take out the pins and see if it will hold its shape. So I'm working on trying to get the other one basted now, and look at this cat! Each cat has to take a turn being extremely distracting. Yes. Yes, you. Hi.
Next, I finished up that circle poof and I moved on to sewing together the bottom of the sleeve seam. So next, I actually added the cuffs that I've been working on to the sleeves themselves, and then I tried them on to see how the length would end up being, because obviously I'd gotten rid of like an inch or two of length because of the way that I had to remove and reattach this cuff. And then we began the collar, and I really wasn't sure what I was going to do for it. I tried the bodice on and I realized that the big ruffle that I had at the top kept falling down, and I really didn't want it to be like an Elizabethan collar sort of thing. I really wanted it to be standing up. I decided to try some smocking ideas. Now, smocking is where you have a bunch of very specifically and carefully made gathers or pleats together, and then you embroider things on top. And I ended up running 3 threads total, one on top, one on bottom, and one kind of through the middle, just because I felt like it wasn't holding a gather very nicely. And I wasn't sure whether or not I had too many gathers, not enough gathers. I really couldn't tell. So then I tried to make the gathers look a little bit better, try to get them stand up properly, and nothing I did really made sense. I should have done a lot more research, but at this point I was just getting so frustrated with this project because it felt like I was trying so many new things that just weren't working. So I set that aside for a second and went back to the cuffs, and I decided that I was going to add a little tiny ruffle to it that was only about 1 inch wide instead of doing the much bigger dramatic lace. So I ended up unpicking several yards of it so that I could use for the cuffs and maybe a few other places. I wasn't sure. So the next day I actually added the ruffle to the cuff itself. I was impressed that just 1 inch of extra ruffle made it look a lot better and more cohesive, so I was very happy with that. Next, I tried to figure out how we could make the ends of the lace on the collar look better, and that looked really, really cute, and it did help that part to stand up a little better. I still didn't really like how floppy the ruffle ended up feeling, so I tried it on a bunch of times and I realized that it just wasn't quite what I was looking for. So finally, I decided to get rid of all of the smocking. It was just not the right time for me to figure out this skill. I decided to just do some pleats for the collar. It took a lot of math to figure out like how big the pleats should be, how much of the pleat should be pleated underneath it. I felt like it just fit the design of the lace quite a bit better, and it was a lot easier to control than gathers, so it just made sense for me. I also added a little piece of edging to the collar to help it stand up a little bit better, and I added it right above the pleats. I also had a plan to add a little bit extra lace to the collar, the same kind of ruffle that I used for the cuffs, and I thought it could be really cute to have little roses on the ends of it to help cover up the like gathered corners of those little quarter circles in the back. And I tried it on and I realized it might actually work better if we turned the entire shirt around and had those quarter circles in the front. The flowers in front didn't really look all that great, so I was like, okay, I don't quite know what I'm going to do with this, but I definitely like it better with that bit on the front because it kind of like hugged my chin nicely, and it put like the really floppy part of the ruffle in the back so you couldn't really see it as much. So I decided that was just what I was going to do for the future. We just turned the whole thing around. And then the next day, I decided that I would just put one of the roses right in the center front, and that ended up working really well. Hi! Yeah, come here. Are you going to help me do the rest of this video? Okay. So I also realized that I was going to need to have a little bit of extra space in the front, just because the way that it was hanging wasn't quite ideal. Basically, it was all just a tube going from the collar down. So I decided that I wanted to add a bit of a yoke. And I decided that I was going to add a yoke in here so that I could add a tiny bit of extra fabric in the center, or at the very least I could like maneuver things around a little bit different. I also added on a bit of edging lace, the same stuff that I had used on the collar, to kind of give a little bit of structure to the bodice fabric up here, because I was worried about the bodice fabric fraying a bit. I worked on the front. I worked on putting it all together and gathering the sides. So all of the fabric that had been from like the armhole to the center, I was now going to have gathered into about 2 inches just on the side. And that gave it so much more shape and gave a lot more room, made it a lot easier to take on and off. And I finished the collar by putting on that last piece of lace with the rose, and I was very excited. It started coming together, and I tried it on to just triple check the sleeve length because I was still kind of paranoid about how it was going to fit, but I ended up actually being really happy with it, and it looked like it was going to poof nicely and everything. So the next day I attached the sleeves, and I added buttonholes on the cuffs and on the collar. I did the same little rosebud thing with the buttons on the collar, and then I was done. It kind of snuck up on me. I was like, oh, I've got so many things to do, and then all of a sudden it was done.